At sunrise, every crop on Earth suddenly becomes still, as though the planet's vegetation has just noticed something. Inside a greenhouse, the first unmistakable warning appears. Leaves begin responding to people instead of sunlight alone. Then the fields begin moving together, creating patterns far too coordinated to resemble ordinary growth or wind. Far beneath the fields, roots begin exchanging signals with astonishing coordination, linking separate plants into one vast network. For the first time, a crop appears to choose where its roots should grow, avoiding rivals while targeting resources. A single insect touches one specimen, yet dozens of isolated plants respond almost immediately afterward. In forests, damaged trees begin receiving carefully positioned gaps in the canopy, allowing sunlight to reach them. By evening, something even stranger happens. Harvested plants begin behaving differently after leaving the fields. Grain silos become the next surprise, when millions of seeds begin shifting in coordinated patterns instead of flowing normally. Within hours, the phenomenon spreads worldwide, reaching nearly every region responsible for feeding humanity. The first real test comes from a harvesting machine, and the crops appear to recognize the threat before it even touches them. Then researchers notice something disturbing. The vegetation seems able to distinguish between harmless objects and harvesting equipment. Even separated groups begin copying the same defensive response, suggesting information can travel farther than anyone expected. After one piece of fruit is removed, nearby trees begin hiding their remaining harvest beneath dense layers of foliage. A harvesting machine enters the field, but the crop begins bending away faster than the equipment can cut through it. Beneath the surface, roots rapidly exchange warnings, spreading the danger signal far beyond the harvested rows. Irrigation stops working as expected when crops deliberately redirect their roots toward water sources humans haven't accessed. Laboratory tests reveal another disturbing change. Different species begin producing different responses to the same environmental conditions. Wild animals encounter the same phenomenon when edible plants suddenly hide their most nutritious parts from approaching mouths. What began as isolated incidents has now become a planetary phenomenon, threatening the system that feeds billions of people. Then something unprecedented happens. Completely different species begin cooperating to block human access to the harvest. New crops no longer follow agricultural layouts, growing into interconnected networks that ignore the boundaries humans created. The crops aren't merely reacting anymore. They appear to anticipate where the machinery will move next. Even dormant seeds begin changing position, separating themselves into groups, for reasons scientists cannot immediately explain. Sunflowers abandon their usual behavior, turning toward passing machinery as though monitoring every human movement nearby. During a devastating drought, thousands of plants synchronize their behavior, conserving water and sharing what remains underground. Scientists isolate one altered specimen, only to discover that nearby plants somehow begin changing in the same direction. By nightfall, trees begin offering selected fruit to wild animals, while deliberately keeping the rest beyond human reach. The crisis reaches storage facilities, when harvested crops begin reorganizing themselves faster than workers can contain them. The real danger finally becomes clear. The crops are alive, but humanity can no longer rely on them for food. The harvest begins, but the wheat moves away from every machine, leaving humans unable to reach the food they planted. Vegetables remain perfectly healthy, yet every mature crop closes itself just before anyone can harvest it. Even underground crops become unreachable, slipping deeper into the soil whenever harvesting begins above them. Automation offers no solution when every robotic arm reaches the fruit only to find it already moving out of reach. Under the cover of darkness, fruit quietly disappears beneath leaves, turning a productive orchard into an unreachable food reserve. One field reacts first. Then the same behavior sweeps across neighboring farms, like a biological warning signal. The strange behavior is no longer confined to farms, as cultivated roots begin connecting with wild vegetation beyond the fields. Processing plants face a new problem when harvested grain begins moving backward through machinery designed to control it. Supermarket shelves begin emptying, not because supplies have vanished, but because the food itself refuses to stay accessible. Even global shipments become difficult to unload when millions of seeds begin arranging themselves into dense, immovable formations. The fields are still green, the harvest is still there, but humanity suddenly has no reliable way to collect it. Harvesting drones are deployed next, but the crops simply hide their food beneath layers the machines cannot reach. Researchers try controlling growth with artificial light, but the vegetation quickly changes its behavior to defeat the experiment. Isolation fails completely when distant plants reproduce the same response without ever touching the tested group. Even water becomes difficult to control when roots deliberately abandon flooded areas and search elsewhere beneath the soil. Simple harvesting nets fail too, because the plants begin lowering their edible parts moments before the net reaches them. The trees then make a more drastic choice, investing less in visible fruit and more in protecting what they already possess. Processing machinery becomes useless when the harvested stalks begin twisting together and blocking the equipment from inside. Even stored seeds appear to organize themselves, separating into groups before researchers can decide where to plant them. Within days, neighboring farms begin behaving alike, suggesting the phenomenon is spreading far beyond individual plants. Then the problem reaches the cities, where stored produce begins growing again, instead of remaining ordinary food on the shelves. Humanity turns to stored grain, only to discover that even dormant seeds have begun changing in ways nobody predicted. Even carefully preserved samples refuse to remain dormant, suggesting the transformation reaches far beyond living fields. Soil isn't necessary anymore. Even hydroponic crops begin linking themselves into one coordinated biological network. The consequences reach livestock when grazing animals discover that familiar pasture is suddenly changing beneath them. Wild vegetation begins signaling across entire ecosystems whenever animals approach, turning ordinary feeding into a coordinated biological response. The phenomenon is no longer agricultural. Entire wild ecosystems begin behaving as though they share a common objective. Then the ocean joins the transformation, as enormous underwater forests begin changing how marine animals move and feed. Fishing suddenly becomes unreliable when marine vegetation starts creating escape routes for the animals humans are trying to catch.